Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am pretty excited for today's show. We've recently partnered up with Business for America for a conversation with Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, and that was an amazing event. I'm so glad we got to have you guys help us with that, and it was a conversation that was necessary. So what I want to take the opportunity to do on this show is explain who Business for America is and exactly what you do and why we partnered with you on the recent conversation with Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold. But before I do that, I love to introduce my guests and explain a little bit as to why you are the experts here, particularly for Business for America.
When we think about sustainability, there are lots of different ways to conceive of it. There's environmental sustainability, there's social sustainability, and then there's also the sustainability of our democracy and the way our government functions or doesn't function and who benefits or doesn't benefit. So Business for America is an organization that makes the business case for what we would consider to be a functional political system where decisions are able to be effectively made, where all sides get their voice included in the process. And Business for America has been working on a number of what we would call structural reforms about gerrymandering, how money is invested and influences politics, who gets to vote, voter registration, and all of those things, Alex, we think influence how competitive the economy becomes. So a dysfunctional political system doesn't augur well for a competitive, successful economy. And so that's one way of looking at sustainability. And for me, having worked on sustainability issues for many, many years, I'm also interested in sort of the sustainability of our political system.
So Sarah, you are the founder of Business for America. You mentioned off air that you had 20 years in the tech field with experience. So let's talk about you and your experience in
systems thinking. So I was in design and technology and leadership, organizational development, and process thinking. I did this for 20 years. I spent the last 15 years of my career at Apple. Worked in several divisions there. I was in the retail division when it was new. I was in software. I was in marketing communications. And just applying, again, that systems thinking and discipline, and really sort of as an intrapreneur, getting to build new things inside of a company where you've got all the resources and access to all the things that you need to make change happen. So it was very fun, very proud of the career that I had. I enjoyed it. And at the same time, there's a point in my life where I thought, I need to be giving back more, and was looking at what I wanted to do with my spare time. I looked at a lot of different ideas, was thinking about environment, was thinking about education, and trying to figure out what I personally could do that would make the biggest impact with my professional skills, but applying them in the world of the nonprofit world of trying to make the world a better place in my spare time. And I just kept coming back to the way that our government was failing to deliver sound public policy, and that this was blocking so many progress on so many issues, and that by addressing this root issue of the dysfunction in our government and the gridlock and the polarization and money having this excessive influence, that we could create better outcomes on a whole host of things.
And again, if you look at issues like climate change or healthcare or infrastructure, education funding, or getting kids literate by the time they're in first grade, those are all critical ingredients, we think, of a more functional economy. And if government doesn't function well, then your economy is going to suffer. So our basic premise is that businesses should be concerned about changing the political process, opening the process up, having more competition, more voices. So one of the issues that we think companies could become more interested in is something called ranked choice voting. And Sarah, why don't you describe how that issue works and why that is an element of a more competitive economy?
Sure. Well, this is a narrative that we love for business, which is the idea of competition. Competition in the economy leads to better products, better services. The same thing, better competition in the political process could help new ideas come into play, is going to require whoever is going to win to do a better job of appealing to a broader set of interests. And in fact, we a lot of times talk about them sort of fighting over the middle where most of the voters are. So with ranked choice voting, instead of picking one candidate from a list, you get to rank your choices. And so this encourages people to show up to the polls when they think, gosh, my number one choice doesn't have a chance. Why even show up? Or gaming out your choices because you're like, I really want to vote for this person, but if I vote for them, isn't that a vote for this other person? You don't have to worry about that anymore. Just rank your choices. And basically, if your first choice has too few votes, then your vote goes to the second person, and so on until you just keep moving out the votes until somebody has a majority. So you end up with a true majority candidate, which is the other thing. Instead of having just a plurality winner, you get a real majority winner.
Yeah.
So you can imagine too where this changes the behavior of candidates. First of all, they're less. It reduces the toxicity of the elections. You'll even see where candidates are now saying like, rank me number one and my competitor here number two because we're similar, or rank, or vice versa. So they're starting to reduce the toxicity of the elections, and they're needing to figure out how to appeal to a broader swath of voters. You can't afford to alienate people with these polarizing positions. So when people think about polarization and gridlock in politics, ranked choice voting is an excellent solution for that, and it fits so much like with the idea of competition and why it works in markets and it works in politics. So that's a reform that we're pretty excited about. And back to Richard's point too, just about talking about democracy and the principle of democracy as being valuable in itself to society and to the business sector. When you look at countries that become more lowercase d democratic, where they are allowing people to vote and engage in the political process, and to hold their governments accountable, you also start to see improved economic performance, reduction in corruption, all these kinds of things in terms of better outcomes for society. In America, it was at the it was actually announced, it was the 2016 report, it was announced in January 2017. The Economist downgraded America from a full democracy to a flawed democracy. That's a real problem. First of all, it's America, right? I thought we were like the leading democracy. And the fact that The Economist of all magazines would have that finding is pretty stunning. And we also then see outcomes in terms of health of mothers and children, and educational outcomes, and air and water and all kinds of things that people care about. We can measure these things and we can see that we're getting worse outcomes. And then we also see a lack of trust in politicians. The ratings for Congress are, at near historic lows. They have been low, and every now and again they go up a little bit, but they're pretty terrible across the board. Like, this isn't acceptable. We should be having candidates that we're excited about voting for. Nobody should be holding their nose at the polls, and that we should be seeing increasingly better outcomes on all of these policies. And it's this dysfunction in government and failure to hold politicians accountable that is the problem. And the way we elect people, and by changing those incentives, we're going to change their behaviors, and we're going to get better outcomes over time.
So I like your ranked choice voting reform that you're looking at. I'm curious to see how far that goes. What other kind of activities are you guys involved in?
I think it's important to start with, how we want to engage businesses themselves. For a corporation, a lot of companies are reluctant to get involved in things that they may see as being left-right politics, right? Anything they see as partisan. And so for us to find those areas where we can make it really clear that this is about structural reforms, that these are nonpartisan, a lot of them are very popular bipartisan reforms. We talk about transparency. The support for that is very high across the board for any political position, 80+% left, right, and center. Sometimes even higher, depending on how you ask the question. So we're starting a lot of work on elections. Everybody believes that, I shouldn't say everybody believes, but most people believe that it's our duty as citizens to show up and have our say, and be informed and to show up. And so we've been talking to, for instance, the folks that organized Time to Vote in 2018, and really just having businesses say, we're going to make sure our employees get time to vote. In some cases, that's paid time or making sure their schedules are arranged or what have you, but that we as a business see that as our job. Of course, some states, they're required to do that, but not everywhere. So there's still, that's taking a stand on something. And we want to continue to help build that program, and then find additional ways that businesses can support the civic engagement of their employees and encourage it among their customers too. There's some places where they have things at their stores and retail outlets to say like, hey, it's election day, get out there, this is important. and that our democracy itself, our representative democracy, is a resource. It's a value to everybody here, and that the businesses that have succeeded on the basis of being a business in America owe it. They have a responsibility, a duty to help ensure its preservation into the future.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me today on Connect and Collaborate. It has been a real pleasure having you.
Thank you so much,
Good.
Alex.
Thank you, Alex.